referendum, especially coming out of an acrimonious election that almost certainly divided this country. We also told you it's time to rebuild this country. In our mind, the timing and the circumstances are not right. A referendum is, in our opinion, very explosive, and more so when intertwined with politics of succession. So for us, it's injusticiable to contemplate going through a referendum, whether it's next year or the year after the next. It will inevitably raise temperatures in this country and entrench existing divisions and obviously create more fault lines. Now, this we cannot afford. Instead, it is the time for economic recovery, political reconciliation, and creating social stability. Having said that, we recognize that times have changed, and now even the opponents of the referendum are now proponents. Now, camps have shifted, and in almost unison, the chorus is the same, just with a little undertone. Then the unanswered question is, where is Wanjiku in all this? Have the views been considered? Is Wanjiku being beaten to submission and, like everything else, forcing this down their throat? What is in it for the ordinary Mwananchi? It is our considered view that the Constitution should not be subjected to whimsical changes. It must be inspired by selflessness and not driven by succession politics. Suffice to say, those seeking to ascend to power and those rooting for self-preservation are pulling everyone else into that noise, which at this point, in our opinion, it's completely unnecessary. It's not lost that even as the calls grow louder, the Constitution has not been fully implemented. Now, in the words of Mark Twain, who's an American writer, humorist, an entrepreneur, publisher, and a lecturer, these are the words: patriotism in supporting your country, or is supporting your country at all times, and your government when it deserves it. And my guests tonight, Otiende Amolo, Sabina Chege, Kabando Kabando, and Governor Stephen Sang. My name is Ken Mijungu. The hashtag for tonight is Sidebar. We will be taking your feedback also in this show at NTV Kenya, at Ken Mijungu, and the SMS feedback line is 20868. Sidebar begins right now.
Wakienda kupanga hiyo referendum, wajue kama referendum ni mambo ya vyeo na viongozi, wasahau. Kama referendum ni ya wananchi, vile tutaondoa umaskini, vile tutapanua nafasi ya kazi, waende wapange watuletee. Lakini kama ni maneno hii ya ukora ya kusema ati fulani apate kiti fulani, sijui fulani apate cheo fulani, hiyo watafute watu wajinga kupelekea hiyo maneno.
And welcome. Obviously, very interesting remarks from number 2. That's the Deputy President. I'd like to put this question to all of you. Is it time to call for a referendum? Let me begin with your reflections, Kabando Kabando. Is it even time to call for a referendum in this country?
Indeed it is. It is not because there is acrimony or disagreement that we should ask the question in a desperate way, but it is because of the needs. You know, Kenyans must be reminded that about 3 years ago, the Parliamentary Committee on Budget and Appropriations did work with the Office of Auditor General. And they consulted every expert that is in town, every constitutional body, every major stakeholder institution, and all the processes of public hearing were done in all the counties. Okay. And the report entitled the report of the working group on the social and economic audit of the 2010 Constitution of Kenya. The 255-page document was admitted in Parliament. It was presented to the President, to the Deputy President, to then leader of CORD, Honorable Odinga, and his deputy, then Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka. And this document is so clear, sector by sector, area by area, and it actually recommends specifically what needs to be done in order to improve governance, control the runaway public wage bill, institutionalize matters that can upgrade the finance management, the public finance management of this country. Okay. So the report is available.
Okay, so in other words, this process was envisioned. It's something that was already set out. By now, it is something that people had already seen happening. That's what you're trying to say.
Let's implement the report by the experts, which was facilitated by the government of Kenya and Parliament. Okay. And to do that, we just be to read the 255 pages
report.
Look at every
I'd like to know from what you're saying, I'll come back to you, but I'd like to know, then why is it that there's a lot of acrimony? Why is it that there are different camps opposing and proposing? And why is it that it's dividing people prior to the weekend? But let me speak to Governor Sang. Is it time to talk about a referendum? It's just been 8 years.
I think the first thing for me would be that maybe the question should be, is it time to amend the Constitution? We keep on mentioning the word referendum to mean amendment to the Constitution.
Yes.
It should be understood that there are certain provisions of the Constitution that you can amend without an amendment, without a referendum. So really the question is it time to amend the Constitution? And in my thinking is that any time is the right time to amend the Constitution.
No,
as long as...
But you see, Governor, you're going to lose us here because we understand about amending the Constitution. But the reason why the referendum is being mentioned is because there are provisions in the Constitution that requires that everyone is brought on board. So, except the parliamentarian. So, if you go that direction, you're going to lose us. So let's concentrate on the fact that we want the majority of Kenyans to be involved in this amendment. No,
that's why I'm saying, even by the way, a popular initiative to amend the Constitution can still be instituted without necessarily a referendum. Okay. So really, let's divorce those two terminologies. Okay. You can amend the Constitution without a referendum. But I'm saying that you can amend the Constitution or even carry out a referendum only when it is necessary. The question is, let's look at the contents. What is it that we want to address in this Constitution?
We'll talk about it.
So for me, really, any time is right to amend the Constitution. However, let's look at the
what
the
they're looking to amend.
Absolutely.
Right, Wakili.
It is definitely time, and I agree with Governor Sang. Let's talk of, the question should always be, is it time to review the Constitution? Okay. Quite honestly, to be fair to Kenyans, to be fair to all of us, that should be the question. Whether it results in a referendum will be a consequence of the areas that are identified as requiring that amendment. Okay. Now, it is definitely time for a number of reasons. But the most basic is that the Constitution itself contemplates that. That is why in Article 89, it contemplates review of constituencies between 8 years and 12 years after its promulgation. We've just started the 9th year. So it contemplates that. But the second reason is that it is usual in the cycle of any constitution in the world to now look at it, especially a transformative constitution like the one we have, to now look back and say, what we created, the institutions we created, the system of government, is it working? And especially, it is particularly right now. The handshake has brought the right atmosphere to consider this review. Until now, it would have been so divisive, it would be unimaginable. And you must know that even the constitution that we have was only promulgated in the context of an agreement between the then President Mwai Kibaki and Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Whenever there appears to be unity of purpose, and that unity exists right now, even those who appeared to oppose it, whether they are now supporting it reluctantly or not, it really does not matter. What matters is that they support it. So let's take advantage of this opportunity. Let us look at the fundamental issues that we might find after we start on the process that the things we need to change may not be as fundamental, but we might also find that they are quite fundamental. So it is the time.
All right. That takes me back to the question I wanted to ask about Kabando. Then why is it that there's a lot of resistance? Why is it that there was different camp? I remember even to amend the Constitution, it started about 3 years ago and it stalled somewhere. So I'd like to talk about all that and the resistance. But let me hear from Sabino Chege. Is it that time? Because one of the areas that they're proposing to amend is to cut the representation, which other quarters says over-representation. And one of the casualties might be the women representative seat. So sitting where you sit, is it that time that we review or look at the Constitution as he says it?
I think when we go back to 2010, when we passed the constitution, we all agreed that it was not 100%. And we agreed with time that we're going to review the constitution. But as Governor Sang and also my colleague have said here, it's not that we don't need to go through a referendum to do the amendment of the constitution. There are things that we can do them through Parliament, and I also want to remind you that Parliament is a representation of the people. So that means when Parliament speaks, the people speak. But we must go back and first consider the views of the Kenyans. Okay. We must have an avenue to hear what the Kenyans want, not what us as politicians want. Back when the new constitution, when there was the bombers and everything else, there were some important clauses of the constitution that were dropped, others were brought in because of selfish interest. And I also want to look at the Senate, how it was formulated. Some of the members then, because they were members of Parliament, they downgraded Senate and they thought it was not that important. Now they have found themselves in the Senate and they feel that they made a mistake. So this time, if you are talking about referendum or constitutional review, we should first ask the people. We should go by the people. We should not take it the political way, or we should also not take it through activism. We should first consider the people. But and for sure, there is
to bring it to the people, it must be at the far end. Once it's formulated, we know we're going there, then we have to bring now the public participation. It can't be now.
The first thing is we must ask ourselves, what do we want to review? And then let the people tell us what they want to review. And the next question is, then do we have to go through a referendum? Because it's also a very expensive affair. Okay. So do we have to go through a referendum, or are there things that we can do through amendment of the Constitution, through Parliament? Okay. And that is a channel that is provided.
Yeah. A referendum is inescapable and completely inevitable, I would say even indispensable, given the proposals, the issues, the proposals. You know, we need to go to the archives. I refer to 4. Number 1, the very document which we invite leaders, including members of Parliament and members of the county assemblies and the political parties to read, that report that is so detailed. And I have said, every scholar of economics in Kenya that is renowned and who is a public intellectual, or in politics, or in law, or in devolution, were very consulted. Every institution, including civil society. Then number 2, you had the Okoa Kenya. They had also very detailed proposals. You had the Pesa Mashinani by the Council of Governors, was very detailed. With the other colleagues, we also initiated the Boresha Katiba Parliamentary Initiative. Those proposals that we are talking about, the raft of proposals, are radical.
It can only lead to a referendum.
It can only lead to a referendum if you want to refresh.
Why don't we now just speak out the issues, for example, that are being fronted for change in this constitution? Let's talk about first ODM, Raila Odinga's proposal that they need to create the 14 regions. In my mind, I'm thinking about what used to be the provincial commissions, provincial administrative centers included in that. I'm thinking about that also. And before I go to the other issue, let's talk about that. Will that necessitate a referendum?
Yes. Obviously, that does. Because that is the structure of government. Okay. Definitely that.
Perhaps before I talk about that, because a little broad, let's talk about Chris Wamalo's proposal, right? That is, Chris Wamalo is proposing that, let me just read this, that the date of the election of the president, governors, MPs, and members of county assemblies for from the 2nd Tuesday of August to the 3rd Monday in December every election year. Let's go with that first. I know it's still going to Parliament. They need support of 233. But let's begin with that again. I
think that's a small issue.
Yes.
The election date is a very, very small issue. In any case, if it were to be implemented or to be changed, it is just going to extend by barely 4 months.
Okay.
So it's not a very
how would it be small? How would it be small, Sabina? And yet this extends your term, right? And extends the term of the president. Article 255. That's one of them. It can be a small issue.
But I think this is not an issue that requires a referendum, because this is an issue that can be handled in Parliament.
Absolutely. Okay.
And the question is, have Kenyans complained about August? Why do we need to move to December? And that's why I said we should not just be looking at ourselves as a politician. We need to involve the people, and we need to know what are Kenyans saying. Are they saying that we need to go to December? Yes, we are going to. When we joined in, and I think Kabado was there in the last Parliament, 11th Parliament, our term was shorter. When now we come in and agree to extend up to December, then we are going to extend our term with 4 months.
Okay.
It of course has an implication with salaries and everything else. And is this what Kenyans would want? I think at the end of the day, this is an issue that can be passed in Parliament. But again, I say we must consult Kenyans and hear from them.
Governor Sang, before you explain to me, Wakili explained to me that in relation to Article 255
well,
F.
First of all,
Yes.
I agree with the Honorable Chege on the need. Is it necessary to move it to December? And we can discuss that. I can tell you, sitting in the committee of experts, we consciously brought it to August.
Okay.
And the reasons for which we brought this to August, no one has dared to demonstrate that they are now illegitimate. And quite honestly, those reasons still remain. But beyond the necessity is the question of the legality. It is my view that even to change that date of election to December, you will require referendum. This is the reason. Primarily, the article that guides election of members of parliament is Article 101. The tragedy is, Article 101, when you go there, it says members of parliament shall be elected on the same date as a general election, which then brings you to the question of election of the president. Election of the president is guided by Article 142 in terms of the term. Now, the term of the president is indicated to start on the day he or she is elected up to the day when the term ends in accordance with Article 136. So it takes you to a 136. What does 136 say? 136 then brings you very clearly and specifies that it begins on the same day as the general, he is elected on the same day as the general election, but ends on the second Tuesday in August every 5th year. So the tragedy with Article 136, it does not just talk of 5 years as with the previous constitution. It specifies the date when it ends.
Okay.
So when you want to change that date of the second Tuesday of August the 5th year, if you want to reduce it by a day or increase it by a day, then you must go to Article 255. Now, Article 255 stipulates that one of the things that requires a referendum is a change on the term of office of the president, 255(1)(f). Inevitably, therefore, it means the question of the change of the date of the general election, whether it's for the governor's election, parliament, or MCAs, affects the term of the president, and it therefore would require referendum. That's number one. Number two, it is also one of those which would not only require a supermajority in any case, it is one that must still go to the Senate for any discussion. But I think the more fundamental issue is, why would we be debating as Parliament a single issue when we are discussing the possibility of reviewing the whole Constitution? Why not package it and leave it there? We might even ask ourselves a more fundamental question, which we asked ourselves for that time. Should we now separate the 6 elections? Should we disassociate the election of the president from members of parliament, from governors and MCAs? You know? So that's where I think the conversation should go.
I'd like to take you on the 10%, because at that time, being the committee of experts, they only said 10% of the Constitution. So when you talk to Kenyans about reviewing the whole Constitution, then we're wondering, was it the 90% that had a problem, or the 10% that had a problem? Governor?
Just one thing. With regard to the change of election date, for me, really, that is a small issue. And it would be unfortunate that the first amendment to a constitution is actually a change of an election date. I think that, as members of parliament, as Kenyans, let's look at more fundamental issues as opposed to that.
Why is it a small issue, Governor, before you move on? Why is it a small issue to you? No. Because it's just a section, just one bit of what we would need.
What my learned CDA is saying is important, that let's look at it holistically.
Okay.
Changing of election date of which election? Of which system of government, what structure.
So it's only small in terms of looking at the other things that
so
we
that
may
somebody
need to do
bringing an amendment of that nature, let's just look at the date of the election. I think that is a bit
okay.
too
that I understand. Let him finish the second point, then we come to you.
The second point is with regard to, and I think this is where the rubber meets the road, that when we had discussions at the time we passed this constitution, we had about 10-20%. Incidentally, the 20 or 10% that was being highlighted then are not featuring right now.
Anywhere.
In fact,
actually,
the issues that were raised by the No campaign, the issues that were raised by the church are not the issues that are being discussed right now. You know, so really it tells you that we are reviewing. If we have to review the Constitution, we are reviewing the entire Constitution. The entire Constitution. Yes. And in fact, there is a chance that you are likely to review the 80% that was said to be okay, and the 20% still remains untouched. Okay. So it really must take us back to the content. Okay. And I think it is really time for us to really comb through and ask ourselves, what exactly do you want to review?
You know, the 20% then in 2010 was not listed. It was just general statements. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And,
which was unfortunate if they couldn't single out what was the problem.
Yes, the clergy, you know, there
were issues because I remember saying there was a lot of the people who were against the Constitution said, but we can't go and vote for this Constitution the way we need to do this, and that.
And then they said, no. Those of us
who will do that,
who are largely on the no side, can point out the issue of, for example, you know, devolution was a matter. You know, whether we were to do 3-tier, you know, what is being proposed now, 3-tier or 2 tiers that we got. Issues relating to provisions with regard to land, you know, land ownership issues of historical issues. So really we had a number of issues that were highlighted. Those are not featuring right now.
What I was saying is that though there may have been those issues, in the public domain, it was not very spread and understood. The demarcation became more political. In fact, the more distinct position was the one that was taken by the church, and that became like the main platform. I think there is a problem with the issue you are discussing about date here. And why I would agree with the governor here is a small issue in the context and in operationalization. If such an issue is to be submitted to Parliament, it would be expected that the member would have caucused and mobilized a few other members, so that is a caucus of parliamentarians, bipartisan, giving it to the plenary for discussion. But when it's a single member, you'll be even asked by your constituents, in whose interest are you taking it forward?
Are you acting? I'd like us to listen to this soundbite from the ODM leader, Raila Odinga, because I'm wondering, Governor Sang, was the issue of the parliamentary system raised there as one of the reasons that we needed to rethink it before we passed it then?
You remember, I mean, the whole Constitution, you know, the working documents all the way to Naivasha were actually parliamentary system.
So things it was never a contention?
No, things changed at the very last minute. I think Abando would be able to help us. Those of, I mean, and
he was in the committee of experts.
He was in the committee. That most of the documents all along, you know, indicated parliamentary, all the way to Naivasha.
Okay, let's listen to this soundbite and come back and discuss it briefly before we take a break.
But the new constitution, like many other new constitutions all over the world, requires to be looked at after 80 years of experimentation, so that we can preserve what is working and correct what is not working properly for our people.
We need to expand the executive to create the position of prime minister with 2 deputy prime ministers, because if that is done, you'll be able to create greater inclusivity.
Okay, preserve what's working and do away with what's not working. But I'm more interested in the other part, because what's not working, for example, in the eyes of many, is the winner takes it all. It's not working for Kenyans, and that's the reason why elections are contested. Sabina.
Well, I would like to say maybe the experience is the best teacher, because once we voted for this constitution, nobody knew what would be the outcome. And even the many caucuses that were done even after, and the many reports, 3 years, I think it was still premature. Right now, we have had a term where we have experienced devolution, where we have seen what the parliamentarians are doing. And the biggest, I think, concern of Kenyans right now is about wage bill. Okay. And I'm a bit concerned when we start now discussing about expansion of the executive, where we will know also the executive comes also with a big package of people to work under the executive. Okay. And so that means we might be telling Kenyans, yes, we are helping you with this hand, but the other hand, we are still taking it.
But if you measure it against the other, expanding the executive and leaving the representative arm of the government the way it is, which one is heavier, Sabina?
You know, when you talk about executive, and you know each office comes comes with a huge
But
responsibility.
not, as,
also a
but
very
not
big
as,
deal.
as big as having the expanded legislative arm of the government.
But let's start from actually from the counties, even before we even come to the National Assembly. Why do we have, and Governor now he's there and he will tell us, we have the chief officers, we have the CCs, we have many people, even the ward representative. Well, at the same time, we are still holding on to the provincial administration. So why would we have a ward representative and we also have a chief in the same place? So there's a lot of duplication.
Absolutely.
There's so much. So can we start with the, the easier part? Why are we having so much duplication within our structure? Okay. And we first start tricking out and saying, on this one, we don't need, and I think the governors, right now, they have a very huge wage bill. We are talking about billions going to the county, but if you look at what is going to development, it's very little. Okay. So there's a lot of duplication of work. There's a lot of positions that were created that are not necessary. And then now we come to the parliament, and we ask ourselves, yes, we have the National Assembly and we have the Senate. So what is working and what is not working? Okay. And I think we should not just be looking at the soft punching bags, like saying, let's get rid of women reps because we think they are 47, it's easy to do away with them. And I would like to remind Kenyans that why the position of the women rep came was because of affirmative action. Out of last parliament where we had 16 women, after we got the position of women reps, people started accepting that women can also be in leadership, they can also become politicians. Now we have 21 members of a single constituency, inspired by the position of these women reps. So do we want to take 3 steps towards affirmative action? And I think Kenya is among the countries in Africa that are heading to the right direction. And then we take away the benefits of affirmative action. Okay. So let's not look at the soft solutions. Let's look at the wholesome and look at the constitution and ask ourselves, where do we need to change? From the counties. Okay. And the governors now, they have good experience. We rushed to devolve health. Was that the right direction? Can we revert health to national government, or can we look at health now? I'm the chair of health, from maybe level 4 going up to be handed over. Do we need a commission?
You know why that's contentious for me? There are counties that health is really working well. The counties that is not working.
Exactly, that's what I've said. Yes. Because, and if you allow me, from level 4, I said, can we revert to the national government? Because governors and the county government, okay, they should concentrate on preventive. Okay. More than curative. Right. The issue of referral, and why we're having so many crises at Kenyatta National Hospital, because we don't have a clear way of referrals. But if we concentrate on the preventive, we allow the governors to have a very good structure, have the nurses and from the level of the dispensaries, have the community workers. Okay. They are cheap. The wage bill for the community workers are easier than the doctors who are being paid maybe 300,000, 400,000 by a governor. Okay. And by the time the doctor wants to go and do further studies, comes to Kenyatta National Hospital, the county is left without a doctor, and they're still paying for them. Okay. And the national government cannot send a doctor there because of this development. So we need to sit down candidly.
In a nutshell, we need to rethink even devolving health. All right, we have a lot of specific issues we want to discuss, gentlemen and lady, and we're coming back to that. But I wanted to give Oteni just a second. Tell me, the statement that was said by Raila, you said it's somewhere in the Constitution. Was it factual, or it was a political statement that we have to review, and across the world, after every 8 to 12 years, we review constitutions?
Well, I don't know if I can explain that in a second, and there are 2 questions that are pending. But the point is, and it's a point I made earlier, that our own constitution appears to contemplate its review in Article 89. When it talks that of review of constituency boundaries between 8 years and 12 years after its enactment. Okay. We've just started the 9th year. Okay. In any country, when you talk of reviewing the boundaries of constituencies, and when those constituencies are the basic units of expression of sovereignty in Article 1, you are contemplating review of that document. However, there are 2 questions that are pending. Maybe we'll find time. First, you had asked the question, why is it that there appears to have been some resistance to this process? Yes. And 2, you asked the question of what are some of the specific changes that we need. And I would be happy to
talk about that. We are discussing that, ladies and gentlemen, after the break. Let's take a look at some feedback. We promised to look at your feedback, which is a lot coming to us through the Twitter handle. Let's read now a few of them. John Dogo says, nothing is expensive as compared to the amount being looted in each and every sector. Let's not complain about the expenditure. Someone actually argued, if we could only be able to save and galvanize what we are losing, we'll be able to save a lot of money. And that's Njigi, he said, when politicians say this is what the people want, which people do they really talk about? I think that's about representation. And Wachira says the referendum to reduce the burden by reducing the number of representatives is long overdue. We only need to resist the temptation to listen to those who want to hijack Wanjiku's referendum for their bloated stomachs. Right, the place of Wanjiku. And Ishmael says, I am okay with the date of the election. We don't need to move that date. What needs to be done is to add infrastructure that will ease the delivery of the results. I think that's pretty much taken care of. We'll take a short break right here on Sidebar. When we come back, we'd like to deal with specific issues that all sides that are involved now calling for the referendum have been dealing with. Let's take a break. We'll be back.